Welcome to the Perez Show. It's the Perez Show. It's the Perez Show. Hey!
Perez, you're crazy.
It's the Perez Show. It's the Perez Show. It's the Perez Show. It's the Perez Show. Hey! It's the Perez Show. It's the Perez Show. The Perez Show is back.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us for this latest episode of Big Boo's Big Archive. My name's Carl Visage, and joining me as ever, my co-host, Mr. Carl Dutton.
Hello.
And Mr. Paul Barron.
Once upon a time, I rise from my grave.
And thank you very much, Paul, for joining us on such short notice.
What can I say? I was bored.
Say, as with this show, usually we schedule things and then somebody can't make it, and then somebody else can't make it, and then somebody forgets, and we eventually get where we can get at least myself and Carl in the same place, and then somebody else usually joins us. This time it's you?
I think the best way to describe the pace of this show is glacial.
Yeah.
But we have managed to get a threesome together. Unfortunately, Joe can't be with us. I think Joe actually did the Celebrity 14 podcast as well, so maybe it's something about celebrity versions of the show he has an issue with.
You can afford to miss this one. There's be another one in summer.
Yeah. But another 20 after that, no on Channel 5. But we are here to talk about Celebrity 15, and I think it's going to be a series we're really going to be looking for. Quite a controversial season. It's one that's very divisive amongst the fan base. And again, I'm really looking forward to talking about this one. Not necessarily because it's a great series, but because I think it provokes a lot of debate, especially two people in particular.
It was a fun, eventful series to begin, and then we got sick of that thing that made it fun and eventful, and then by the end, it just ended with a...
wet firework.
Well, I sort of disagree with that, but we'll get to that when it comes, because to be honest, I quite like the finale.
Yeah, the result just made me go...
Let's get the counter on.
Let's get the counter on. There's got a lot of sides in this one, I've got a feeling.
Yeah. Anybody called Katie on this show, just...
You basically go, oh, God. And then you're going to find out it's Katie Hopkins and say, oh, great, target practice.
Yes.
At least she was doing what she promised.
What?
At least
being
she was...
being an absolute...
Yeah, but at least she was being honest about it. Anyway.
We'll get to that when it comes.
Right.
Well, of course, we are here to talk about Celebrity 15, and I think there's only one place to start off with, which is the pre-show. Now, one of the things I noticed going into this series was most of the time Channel 5 don't really do hype surrounding the Celebrity series, in my opinion. It's more just a case of, oh, here's another Celebrity Big Brother for you, to take it, enjoy it, and then be off with it. That's pretty much how it feels to me. I mean, I do have a lot more time for the Channel 5 view of the show, but that's one of the issues I do have is the lack of hype. I don't know why though, I really got the feeling for this series in particular that Channel 5 really went out their way to try and hype it.
In what way?
Because I always remembered with the Channel 4 celebrity versions that they always used to run some sort of pre-show, and it was like the best showmans, there's most outrageous moments, etc. And this year was the first time that Channel 5 did that, and I always found that quite...
Well, it's the first time they've had enough content to make one.
But they used a lot of the Channel 4 footage as well in the coverage. So
oh, did they? Okay, fair enough.
They did. They mentioned Shilpagate and John McCurrick in his underwear, George Galloway.
Okay, yeah, we've never had it where Channel 5 have used Channel 4 footage before. That's good. Because when they started, they had this whole thing of, it's new, it's different, this is season 1. And then by the, couple of years in, they were like, oh yeah, it's not, is it?
Yeah.
It's actually surprising to actually hear about that because, with Channel 5 being, or as I like to call it, Britain's version of TMZ.
Well, I think this was the first series under the ownership of Viacom, because I think Richard Desmond sold it to Viacom after the summer series. So this is the first...
there was a noted kind of... Look, there was a lot of the problems that come from the producers was still there, but I had this feeling when I was watching the show, there was something less tacky about it, and that's probably what it was.
Yes.
Holy hell.
Because I honestly watched a couple of those early episodes of Celebrity 15, and it felt like an old Channel 4 series at times.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
it still had the same, as I keep referring to it, the Vince Russo issue of the, keep twists, some more twists, but
More twist like an M. Night Shyamalan movie.
oh god,
there we go.
it's a happening.
Quickly, get the lawnmower. It's surprising they've actually gone back to the way they were.
It did get a little bit more convoluted coming the end of the show, but we'll get to that. But especially during the early stages of the show, honestly, that first 9-10 day stint of this series is up there as one of the best runs of episodes that the Celebrity franchise has ever had. But we'll work out why that all went wrong so quickly when we get to it. The other thing I want to talk about concerning the pre-show is the theme of this series. Now, every year, every series has a theme. Now, this one was Twisted Fairy Tale. Now, I quite liked the theme in theory. I thought the idea of Twisted Fairy Tale, you could have...
Didn't do anything with it, though, did they?
They didn't do anything with it. I mean, there was what? There was Katie Hopkins' launch night task. There was Cammy Lee being Queen of the Fairies. And that's it. That's all that I could think of.
Here's what the advert should have said. Here's how it should have started. You like Frozen, don't you? Well, this Big Brother's going to be like Frozen. Watch us.
Like the song with this show. Let it go. Let it go.
No.
Please, no, Paul.
Sorry, but, it's catchy, but again, it's fucking
That's
annoying.
why we don't want you to sing it.
Yeah, AIDS is also catchy, but you don't want it.
Fair dues.
They come up with this great theme, Twisted Fairy Tale. All these potential ideas going around our heads over what they could do. And there's, 2 tasks. And this is the real issue as well with the Channel 5 era, was that they come up with these ideas and almost, again, they Russicize it. They abandon them pretty much straight away.
Yeah, they're like, oh, this is what the show's going to be, except we're not. Like, remember the whole thing with the key last year and the room and the whole digital... Yeah, that didn't go anywhere, did it?
No. I mean, and I don't like them repeating tasks over, because I think that's a bit lazy, but even stuff like, can you remember Carissa and Christina in Celebrity 9? The dodgy porridge? Yeah, but stuff like that. I mean, that's like Twisted Fairy Tale theme, like cat urine porridge and Goldilocks. That's...
Yeah.
Stuff like that would have worked perfectly with the theme, and they just did not do anything with it.
No, they just did the usual, let's give somebody a wire and have them do stuff.
Yeah. And we'll get to our first wire of the year when we come to our launch night task, our traditional launch night task. Before we do, though, we're going to be looking at the 14 people who were occupying the house. And I don't know about you, I thought this was quite a strong cast this year. I mean, especially for the Channel 5 era of the show and a lot of the somewhat negative connotations that come with that. I think the star power this year was quite good.
Yeah.
It was current. I'll say it was. There was a few in there that were sort of, oh my god, there's that guy I recognise from the 80s who I haven't seen in 30 years. There was a couple of those. Far less people from other reality shows, and I know that was a thing this year where
They made a big deal about that.
Yeah, there was a whole controversy with the agents getting together and causing showmances and things, so they deliberately went out of their way to not have any of those, Geordie Shore, Towie type peoples, which really, really improved the cast of the show, I feel.
As well.
Thank you, God.
Mind you, though, we did have Cammy Lee, and her big fame thing was Kirk Norcross, so that's probably the old... And Chloe as well, X on the Beach.
Yeah, definitely, but, you're always going to have those people who are like, who are they? Oh, they're famous for something. I mean, that goes back to what's our favourite of the celebrity series ever. It even had one of those in them, so...
Yeah, but I think you need that sort of diversity, though. You can't be reliant on big names. You need to have a couple of drastic...
Well, they blew their budget on somebody who came halfway, so...
And we'll be questioning whether that was a good decision or not once we get to that certain person. Pricey.
Yeah, and also you've got the David Hasselhoff's fucking kid from Baywatch.
And that actually brings me on to another point as well, which is this had the largest number of American housemates. 14 housemates this year, 5 were American. Did that bother you at all?
No, not really, but I feel like it was a reaction thing. It was like, okay, so we keep putting these tower people in there and they're doing nothing and they might be faking showmances. Screw them. What are the ones that are always giving us entertainment to drop
Americans.
stories? The American characters. So let's have 5 freaking versions of, the people we've had in the past, the twins and freaking, what were they called? The couple.
Spy.
Yeah. Let's throw 5 of those people in there and see what happens. And we saw exactly what happened, which was ejections, removals. 1 or 2 of those personalities makes the show entertaining because everybody goes against them. A few of those personalities in there all together, and it was a battle royale. This was certainly an eventful. The first 2 weeks was so entertaining. And every week you tuned in and go, wait, what? Everything that was happening. And it just seemed like, how could another person's been thrown out? What is going on in there?
But the hype that sort of generated, though, having so much controversy and scandal so often. I mean, people were talking about the celebrity branch of the franchise in a way that they hadn't done in ages. I mean, it was big water cooler television, briefly.
Yeah, and it also wasn't something that they could lay on the show either. It was just these people being morons, and
I was actually surprised that Ken from Coronation Street, not Ken Barlow, the other Ken.
I know which one you mean, yeah.
Yeah, I'm surprised he actually I'm actually surprised he got the boot. He looked so innocent.
And the Ken and the downfall of Ken is going to be one of the big things we're going to talk about once we do League One. But we're going to be talking about the big controversial casting of Launch Night, and that is our good friend Katie Hopkins.
Which turned out to be not so controversial, at least in the house. Sure, she got more loudmouth later on, but, her whole task as she started out was, okay, we want you to be your bitch self, here's a task for you to be your bitch self, and she kind of, sort of, did it. Then when she got in there, she then started just being a normal person, and I think it was a combination of being overshadowed by some of the stuff the other crazier people were doing. So she seemed almost innocent compared to some of the stuff that was going on. And maybe some of that was a bit of strategy, though. But I don't know, because I don't think she cares what people think about her. So maybe it's just that, wow, okay, she has some really stupid opinions, but she's being really rational and talking common sense, which I think people gravitated towards early on, as opposed to against the sort of people who were just toxic television. But entertainment, but dear God, it was the kind of heat that makes you want to turn off, but you keep watching to see the car crash.
Do you think possibly as well, maybe those low expectations that people had of Katie Hopkins going into the show was part of the reason why she ended up doing so well?
Well, everybody thought she was going to be the villain, and then she wasn't, because there were people in there that were far more annoying, far more obnoxious, and self-centered.
Yeah, let's see her talk about names now.
Unless she was given an open forum, which she was a couple of times, to talk about people and say things that people disagreed with, other than that, she was just to herself, because she's a writer, and, she has these opinions, but she's not going to go around the house yelling them. Well, she did in some cases, but only to one particular person.
And that, of course, brings us on to Katie's launch night task, which was basically, as you said, her chance to try and slag off all the housemates coming into the house. But one of the things that really stood out for me was, look, I remember when Katie Hopkins was in The Apprentice, and she was absolutely amazing on that show, a great villain. And she has built up this reputation as just basically being this loudmouth, almost voice of the outspoken majority. That's the way she likes to sell herself. But one of the things that really came through to me when I was watching her doing that launch night task is she isn't that intelligent. Because she sells herself as being intelligent, well-spoken, posh, etc. But if you listen to a lot of the things that she was critiquing the housemates on, these weren't cutting-edge, scathing comments. These were very generalised, very weak statements. And it just shows that, in my opinion, that she can't think.
I think it's down to the fact of, when you're writing a column or something, you have time to think about what you're going to say. You can self-edit. You have an editor there to edit you down. This is just, on the fly, which, she's not an improv comedian.
But it did break a lot. It broke for me a lot of the preconceptions that some people had of Katie Hopkins, that she was this scathing, quite witty, sarcastic person in the way that she sells herself. And in my opinion, this task just symbolised that she wasn't. Whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, I'm not sure, but it was just one of the big observations I made. But of course, after she made those, after she did a critique on all the housemates, she had to do what was dubbed Magic Mirror nominations, where she had to choose 2 people based on first impressions who were going to be nominated for that week. And she chose Alexander and Chloe. Now, what was your view on those nominations? Right choices based off first impressions?
It was just her going, I don't like her because she's got big breasts, and I don't like her because she looks like she's dressed slutty, so I'm going to vote for them. So,
which one was Alexander, big breasts or slutty?
Pass.
I don't know, those shoes were a bit dodgy, so I'm favouring the latter. But yeah, that was our launch night task. One of the weaker ones, I have to be honest, but they're just essentially fun. That's all those launch night tasks are. They're just ice-breaking fun. Now, a couple of days later, though, Alexander and Chloe already nominated. It was our time for that unique thing, which was face-to-face nominations. They haven't done that for a long time, have they?
No, since last 2 weeks. No. There was, I think, one normal nomination on this series that didn't have a twist. When the normality is the exception, it's time to go back to the drawing board. It's just every week there was some other, oh look, we're doing this version of nominations,
But of course, during those nominations, all the housemates had to nominate one person who would join Alexander and Chloe on the nominee booth. Now, from what we saw on the live show, because it was live nominations, the impression that came to us from an audience was that Ken wants to go home. He's the sad old man. Well, let's give him what he wants. Let's basically do a mercy kill, have him nominated, and have him go first. What we didn't get until later on in the show, on yesterday's show, was the reason why Ken wanted to go. And this brings us on to the next talking point, which is the emergence of Ken's more vulgar side. Because essentially what happened was that Ken started with a lot of his comments, a lot of them very inappropriate, especially around women. The women reacted badly to it, as they should. And that was the reason Ken wanted to go, because people wouldn't take his viewpoint.
Yeah, and here's the question. Was it him doing it deliberately? Or was it to get booted, or was it just him being bored, and that was just him being an old man who didn't really understand that he can't say these things?
Yeah.
I always think it was a combination of all three. I think Ken always used to make that argument that what he was doing was for television. And I do understand that to an extent, but you have to be very careful about how you're perceived on a show like Big Brother. Because, yeah, there's a lot of manipulation around, there's a lot of things which are taken out of context. But when you're making comments saying that the bathroom's the best place to be because you can look at the women's arses, that's too far for me.
Yeah, I don't. That one, I think the women overreacted to. I mean, whatever. But people rose to it, and yes, he shouldn't have said it. But that one was the one that was just like, wow, people are making a huge deal about it. But it was the stuff that followed with Alexander that was the, no.
But like I really came into this because I remember when Coronation Street was on back in the 90s, and Ken Morley was probably up there with Julie Goodyear and being like the big star name of the show. And Julie, of course, turned out amazing when she was on Celebrity 10, and Ken just, in my opinion, came across as a sleaze. I never enjoyed watching Ken during the show, and of course we'll get to him when we do our assessment. But there was a lot of comments about it, and I really didn't enjoy watching him. Honestly, I'd probably see him as the worst housemate of the series, but again, we're getting ahead of ourselves.
But at least he provided something, even if that is, hating him for his being such an ignorant sexist.
But of course, when Ken wasn't being a sexist or a racist, he was being overshadowed by Jeremy Jackson. And of course, this brings us on to the issue in the bathroom, where Jeremy was alleged to have groped Chloe in the bathroom. Chloe, of course, gets very upset about this, and Jeremy ends up getting ejected.
Yeah, this was the first of them. He was really kind of... You watched him for those first few days, you're like, wow, something's not quite right there. And he just kind of kept going more and more, and then he did this inappropriate thing, which was just the nail in the coffin, and because Chloe made, a big deal out of it. If she'd been like, oh, that's bad, don't do that. But it's because she got so upset that it was like, okay, yeah, we have to kick him out for this. We can't just, warn him.
I think it was a mix of both, though. I think, especially from what we saw on the highlights show, if I made that judgment call based on that particular incident, I think I would have given him a warning. But I think what it was the combination of a lot of factors. It was the fact that Jeremy was a little bit unhinged, and especially because I believe he was a recovering alcoholic. He'd been on celebrity rehab beforehand. There'd been lots of reports about his drinking drug problems. And I believe he just started drinking. He was just beginning to relapse whilst he was in the house. And there was a lot of comments he was making along the lines of, you live the most when you're closest to death and stuff like that. I think production used the Chloe incident to pull him out for his own safety.
Yeah, and there was also the thing he said during the nominations where it was like, we're going to kill off the weakest member. Yeah, and all this stuff.
I understand the production want to try and create controversy, and especially they'll go for risky casting opportunities to do that. But do you think it was wise putting Jeremy in there?
I think with TV such as this, they really want to see a car crash. And if you put a flame near petrol, chances are it's going to explode. So yeah.
But I think there's a level to it though. I think there's a line that you cross, and I think Jeremy did that because as much as I love Gary Busey, at times I questioned whether it was wise to put Gary in there myself.
And then you start to think, yeah, it's Channel 5. We're going to be doing we're doing these sort of things so low that we're scraping, the outer core in a minute.
Honestly, Channel 5 have been so lucky in terms of, because they've made risky casting choices for years now, because Lauren Harry's had all of her problems. They managed to get through that series with her okay. They had, as I said, Gary, who maybe shouldn't have been there, and they managed to get through that one. It was a ticking time bomb in regards to having this sort of issue happening, and I think it blew up with Jeremy, and I think Jeremy was a casting mistake in my opinion. Again,
I keep on saying that that Channel 5 is trying to be the British version of TMZ, except they've got shows like Gotham on there as well. So
yeah, I think that they don't mind the controversy, and let's not forget that there was also, Big Brother 2006, which also had its fair share of, Channel 4 aren't innocent of this as well. Maybe they were a little more stringent with it, but both shows, versus the shows, will take advantage of people who are not quite right to make entertaining television. Channel 5 are just a little more on it with that one. Yeah, they obviously want the stories and stuff. I mean, at the end of the day, who could have known whether he was going to do this? It wasn't like he started drinking and went nuts. It was just that he did something that if he was out in a nightclub, he would have got slapped for, and in this case, he was getting kicked out of the house.
I think it's a shame as well because at times there were aspects of Jeremy. There were times when I did see him, and he did seem quite nice. He did seem quite likable, and it's a shame that a lot of these demons that he does have ended up distracting away from a guy that I would like to have known more about. Obviously, he was only in there for 3 days, so we can't make sweeping statements about him, but I would have liked to have seen more to him. It's quite a sad story, in my opinion.
Yeah. Again, like I always say with a twitchy eye, we've all got our inner demons.
We have, unfortunately, and a lot of them came out, especially when we come to our next topic. It symbolises just how on it these first few weeks were, because a few days after Jeremy ends up being ejected, he's followed out the door by Ken Morley. Now, this was a culmination of a lot of things. This wasn't one major incident, because Ken had issues with racism. He would use the term Negro very casually, much more casually than you can afford to in this day and age.
Yeah, but I think it was the second that comment was like, oh, and then it was the second comment that was the 1-2 punch.
It was quite appropriate for Frank Bruno.
Yeah.
Because that's who we made the comment about.
Oh my god, no! Ken, you look so innocent. You were on bloody,
Yeah, but the something about having it was the connotation, the way he said it. He said, oh, we need a Negro to stoke those fires. It was like, oh, good lord. And then the second comment, which, apologies, I'm just repeating what he said. His second comment was when we used to call black kids pickaninnies. That was his second comment. Yep.
God. Next thing you know, the CGI Pennines count is probably going to be, brought out as some sort of raging alcoholic with drugs and all that.
Yeah, and let me just say this: that he wasn't kicked out for those comments. It took him to say a couple more, which is very surprising considering what some people have been kicked out for before.
Yes. It was more a continuation of things. It wasn't the fact it wasn't specifically what he said and how nasty things were in the way he said it. It was just how continual it was. It was the fact he was warned about it and kept doing it. And again, whether or not that was Ken wanting to be kicked out. But the thing was, though, as I mentioned before, why would someone want to try and risk how they're perceived for the sake of that? Because again, Ken Morley was lovable grandfatherly figure, the lovable eccentric old man from Fresh Ghost from Coronation Street.
I think it's as simple as he got a phone call that said, we will give you X amount of pounds to come onto this show. He needed the money, so he did it. And turns out that exposing yourself is not always the best thing for some people. You see behind the facade, you see behind the mask and the character they play on TV, and you see the real person, and sometimes you don't like what you see.
Exactly.
And now he's considered your racist lovable grandfather that everyone's loved to see.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's a recency bias. I honestly do think Ken has to be up there as one of the people who most damaged their careers by going on the show.
I don't think he had a career left.
Well, he's 72 years old, but even then, people are going to look back and see him in a different light.
He's damaged his public image, definitely.
Yes, and that's a better way of putting it. Was there any positive aspects towards Ken at all? Any sort of way of redeeming him at all?
He was... No.
Like bringing up Chevy Chase in a conversation, you basically go, he was... Nah. He was an asshole.
Yeah, I'm surprised you haven't got Chevy Chase yet for Big Brother.
Oh, that would be brilliant. That man's full of controversy.
Shall we move on then?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And we're going to move on because the first 2 times that we've had a delayed eviction, they ended up being cancelled. That became a theme, that these Tuesday evictions that were planned, because they moved the midweek eviction from Wednesday to Tuesday.
Well, because they kept having to cancel them because...
They kept having to cancel it.
They didn't have enough housemates because they kept kicking them out.
And one of the times they tried to fill one of those eviction dates was through a task. I believe the task was that they were given selected categories and they had to choose one person off the board who they felt represented that category, and it would leave the one person remaining to be nominated for a twist. And that twist was that Camille Lee, who ended up being the last person left on the board, ended up becoming crowned as Queen of the Fairies.
Yeah, it was another, silly twist that everybody knew how it was going to end, and it was just another way to, let's see what happens when the person they don't like gets in charge. And,
Am I the only one who got the impression they wanted to try and give that to Perez? Because even the fact that later they added a King of the Fairies, which of course Perez ended up being crowned as, because him and Camille were quite close then. And this is also where the resentment between Hopkins and Perez begins to start bubbling a bit.
I think that it just kind of you realise that these two personalities were going to clash, and that's what happened. And I think the cynical side of me saw that Katie saw that Perez was just the most annoying, obnoxious. Look, people who like that, all power to you. I cannot watch it. I could not stand him. Everything he did annoyed me. I wanted to punch him in the face. I wanted to shoot him in the face with a shotgun. Just everything about that sort of character that's just like, look at me, look at me, look at me. I just want to look elsewhere. And I almost rallied behind Katie because she was the one who was saying that to him. Now, obviously, that was because she's outspoken and, I can't get behind Katie in any other way. But everything that she said, I agree with. I just think she went overboard with it. And I think she was definitely seeing a chance for her to become the hero of this story and get votes and things behind her by going up against the worst person in the house. And he saw that, and then they both thought they were playing each other, and they were both thinking they were being clever, when in reality they were just being idiots.
You completely nailed it on the head, especially in regards to Katie Hopkins' role in this, because I honestly feel, because I'm not a Katie Hopkins fan, and certainly haven't been in the whole Twitter thing, or whole This Morning thing, especially not in the house. I was quite alarmed, to be honest, that there were a lot of people who were willing to forgive a lot of Katie's negative aspects because of the fact she opposed Perez.
Yeah.
It really sort of irked me that there were people willing to overlook that just because there was someone else who was just a little bit worse.
Both inside and outside.
Yeah, it doesn't justify Katie's behaviour, though, in my opinion.
No, it doesn't. And she did go too much, and she did say things that were too much. But yeah, again, it's a case of nobody's in the right here. It's just the one person was being a rational person who I could actually tolerate watching, and one person wasn't. And that's why I kind of was on her side more so than, obviously, because I could not stand Perez. But at the same time, by the end, I just got to the point of, you know what, you're both idiots. And you're not being clever, you're not playing the game, you're just both being obnoxious children. Shut up.
And that's why the direction of the series took, especially after Katie Price entered the house. That's why the direction really annoyed me, because the show was basically sold on being you're either Team Perez or Team Hopkins. What if you disliked both? What if you thought she was a nasty, malicious cow and he was an over-the-top irritant?
Do you want the answers to that? In my case, I turned off. I watched the first 2 weeks, and then after I realised just that thing, I stopped watching, and it took me to do a kind of a recap just so I could do the show to know who won. Even I just didn't care anymore. I was just done with the show. That on top of the production side of things, I was just done with the show.
I think with that sort of term is, do you remember the scene in The Simpsons where all the kids switched off their TVs and just went outside and played? That's probably what happened at this moment. All the people who loved Big Brother just went. It just ended up, look, people.
That's a good one. That's a good one, Paul. I'll have to give you that.
Thank you.
But it's really going to make the second half of this podcast really, really difficult, though, since I was the only one who watched it.
I mean, I know what happened now, but yeah.
One thing I'm sure we all did watch, though, probably through our fingers, was the Perez simulated sex scene in the garden.
Oh boy, he started getting in his head that, oh look, I annoy them when I do this, so I'm just going to keep being, if I'm going to be, and to his credit, this was his thought process, if I'm going to be alienated and turn into the villain when I don't do these things, I'm just going to do what they think I'm doing, even more so, and I'm just going to watch them get riled up, and they did, so he was right, but...
Honestly, though, again, we criticised Channel 5 and the way they edit things. The editing on this segment of the show is absolutely brilliant, because Perez is obviously outside the garden. He's starting to troll the girls through the bedroom windows, and he starts humping the chair, and the girls start talking between each other, getting annoyed. Then Perez starts humping the walls louder, and the girls are starting to really get agitated. Perez full on wailing in the garden, girls screaming at each other.
Yeah, he again, didn't like the guy, but he knew how to push buttons because he made a career of it. So,
and if there was one time which I could tolerate Perez, that was it, because that was funny for me. And there was that great moment as well where Michelle's in the diary room. Her voice is hoarse because she's been screaming so much, and she said, "This man is setting back gay rights 50 years." And it comes to Perez, "Oh my God, I just came 3 times."
I would probably agree with you there, considering the fact that you saw someone like that, you whooping and hollering in the friggin' back garden. Yeah, that's saying back the whole.
And at this point, up until then, I was kind of a Michelle fan, and I know a lot of people were, but I think the fact that she sided with Katie Hopkins so much was really her downfall in terms of probably winning the show.
It was her downfall, and we'll certainly get to that. And it's part of the reason why I wish we had Joe here, because I know Joe's probably one of the big Michelle defenders still, so it would have been great to have his opinion here. Unfortunately, though, we didn't get that, and unfortunately, though, we come to the first eviction of the week. Michelle, of course, is one of the nominees, alongside Alexander, Alicia Duval, and Chloe Goodman. Vote to say for this year, as it is for all the celebrity versions, and it was Chloe who ended up being evicted. And I hate to say it, after the whole Jeremy situation died down, not a big loss.
No, it was kind of, well, there we go. It's one of the ones that wasn't really making any event.
Paul, do you have any opinion at all on Chloe?
Not really. We did bugger all, so, there's my answer.
Well, I mean, she provided the whole... She was on the show. She did have some things going on with maybe a showmance, maybe whatever, and at least that was something that she was involved with the whole first, kick out, and she did react well and be a good, opponent in terms of entertainment for Perez. So she did do some stuff. It wasn't like Alexander or somebody who didn't really add anything.
Yeah. Well, actually, though, we'll come to it where Alexander adds one of the big controversies, especially in regards to how he ends up leaving the house, but we'll get to that later. One little off-topic things we do want to talk about in regards to Chloe. Me and Paul were talking about this before I went on the show. Where does Chloe rank on the Bobby Sable scale of celebrity?
No, she was. I think she was well above average. I think she provided. She actually provided some thing, but in terms of where she was, in terms of who we knew, yeah, I'm a bad person to ask because I don't follow that tabloid bullshit anyway.
Yeah. So if there are any Ex on the Beach fans, please get in touch with us. We'd love to hear your opinions on how famous Chloe Goodman is.
Because quite frankly, we don't know anyone in the world who actually watches that show. Because it's Geordie Shaw on the beach with exes.
Exactly. But we do end up trading up the star power, though, as out goes Chloe Goodman and in comes Katie Price.
Holy crap. The A-list of the Z-list.
I was going to say, my reaction to straight away was, oh, fuck. And I know they've been trying to coax her into it for years. She said, I will never be on that show and all this stuff. And for years and years and years, they kept on at her and even hired one of her friends to host their sideshow and all this. So it was almost inevitable, but it was just like, now it's going to be her show, isn't it? Just because they paid so much money to finally get her on, and it's this, just, god damn it.
To be honest, though, as you mentioned before, though, Katie Price has had such a relationship with Big Brother, even though she hasn't personally been on it herself. Because
anybody who's ever been with her, other than her most famous ex, has been on the show.
Exactly. I mean, we've had Alex Reid who was in there, and Rylan, of course, is her best friend. Both of them ironically won, so there was always this big expectation of Pricey going into it. One of the things I do ask, though, is, as we've all suggested, those first 9 or 10 days in the show were absolutely amazing television in terms of the scandal, controversy, etc. Did Katie going in disrupt that dynamic?
Yes.
But there was a big drop in quality once she entered.
Yes. Yeah, most definitely, because some people started being on more of their better behaviour, because at least for a couple of days, and again it became all about her, which was my exact, that was strike one in terms of when I ended up turning off.
I never got the impression it was. I think, yeah, she got the initial new entrant task has become cliched with Channel 5. But I think after that, though, she sort of slipped into the background a bit.
She did, but then she still ended up winning.
Yeah.
Like it was like you knew, no matter whether she was on the show or not, she was going to be popular just because of who she was. She did nothing to the show. The only thing she did in the show, the only thing she did to win, was be her.
Or not be Katie Hopkins, which we'll get to later.
Yeah.
The next thing we are going to be talking about, though, was something we touched on. Alexander, of course, survived that eviction. And then yet a couple of days later pulled himself an Olaf and ended up leaving the house. Now, there was a lot of controversy, though, surrounding this departure. And it's one of the things I'm going to want to bring up, because the suggestion brought to us from the show was that Alexander decided to leave on his own terms. But what later came out, though, was there was a lot of beliefs to say that he threatened Perez behind the scenes. Perez had exaggerated a lot of opinions, said he feared for his safety without Alexander being there. There was a lot of hints surrounding what could potentially be homophobic comments. And there was also the suggestion that Alexander was actually paid off to leave the house, which was why we never got an official departure where we actually see him say, I want to quit, and here see him actually leave. That was never broadcast. It It was a very strange elimination. I just want your opinions on that.
It was just like Coolio. It was the same sort of thing of yes, he said the most controversial thing, which maybe he should have been, got a warning for, which he did, and then it was like, well, maybe he should have been kicked out for that, but then he basically wanted to go, and when he didn't go on the eviction, that's when he stepped it up in terms of, I think, maybe wanting to leave, so he was willing to just... I mean, I know he was on the edge because of it, and that's why he said that comment in the first place. And then it was a case of, well, he wants to go, the production are going to get in trouble if he stays, so let's just both agree to part ways.
Do you think that production basically made the choice between it's either Alex or Perez, and went with Perez?
That was certainly what the people in the house took. They were like, oh, you caused it, you exaggerated it, you pushed him to say that comment because you wanted him out. As much as I hate Perez, I think that's extreme exaggeration. I think that's nonsense. I think that the man should be able to control himself and not say those things just because he was, yes, he was goading him, but just walk away, just go away from him and let the others handle it. At the end of the day, if he wanted to leave, then leave. Goodbye.
When we talk about Alexander as a housemate, though, he wasn't the most exciting person. He was that almost sort of I'm trying to think of the person who's probably most comparable to. I'd probably say Jermaine Jackson, in that he's just sort of this wise, sort of like fatherly figure, not really exciting, but someone you could turn to hopefully be this sort of likable presence in there. And of course, once that was basically eliminated by some of these comments, it was basically surplus to requirement, in my opinion. But you mentioned there as well a lot of the controversy surrounding the way they targeted Perez after Alexander left, basically making it out that he was the one who caused it. The big person to jump on that bandwagon, I thought, was Katie Hopkins.
Well, no shit.
Especially this plays into the whole agenda I felt Katie had in wanting to try and be seen as the hero to Perez's villain, because she almost made up this big idea about how Alexander was the big guy. Everybody loved him. I loved him. He was my friend, and you've done this to my friend. Hang on a minute. You nominated him on night one. You have a massive agenda against Americans. You admit to hating them, and yet suddenly you're making it out you're best friends with Alexander.
Yep. Everything about all this stuff was so fake and over the top. I said in my comment earlier about how basically, she definitely was playing up to it to be the hero of this story, but just was going too far with it, and it was just like, oh, shut up.
Yeah. And by the end of the
season... But what annoyed me was how people rallied behind her and actually believed her, and like she almost became like the leader of the other side of the house. It was like, are you people just... Oh, whatever.
Well, again, I think a lot of that might be down to the fact of Katie Hopkins' star power. You don't want to be seen to be upsetting the big superstar signing. Right?
Well, yeah, but I think it might also be down to the fact of they all want to say these things to him, but they don't, and she has the balls to say those things to him, so they rally behind her as a human shield and be their mouthpiece.
That is a really good theory, and I think there are maybe some people that did that. I think people like Cammy Lee, especially when we get to her, I think she was one of those people who especially hid behind Hopkins. One person who did hide behind something else, though, was Kavanagh. Now, this is our chance to talk about Kavanagh, the bad drunk.
Or Kavanagh, the name I can't pronounce properly.
His drunk moment was, like, of all the people you're going to start a fight with in that house, he picked
Keith Chegwin.
He's like, that nice guy who's just everybody's friend, who's just standing in the corner not saying much. Yeah, I'm going to pick a fight with him. Because you're always disrespecting me, and you know how you do it, and all this stuff, and Keith's just sitting there going, what? Yeah, I don't know what this was about.
It was a strange one as well, but wasn't it something as well about Keith being a recovering alcoholic that got a lot of people upset as well?
Yeah, like he was like, how dare you tell me I've had enough to drink and all this stuff. I think, almost, and just reading between the lines of sort of like pseudo bullshit psychology stuff, I will just say I think that he maybe wanted more attention from Keith, and Keith didn't give it to him, so then when he got drunk he just kind of took it out on him and was like, oh, how dare you.
I think he did ham up a lot of his behaviour once he'd had drinks. I think a lot of it was Kavanagh himself, but I think he did ham it up.
I think he was just being really stupid when he was being drunk, and you saw the regret in his face the next day. It was like, what the hell?
I have no problem with Kavanagh. I mean, some of us have done and said something stupid when we're drunk. I'm sort of a victim of that. I have real big guilt trips, or if I've accidentally vomited in a club somewhere, I apologize to someone who's working at that club. So we've all done stupid shit. It's just the fact that he had the audacity.
Like,
to
there's
drunk.
So many other people in that house he could have picked a fight with, and the people would have been fine with it. It was just that he picked a fight.
Keith Chegwin. You don't slag off Keith Chegwin.
He's the nice uncle that gives you chocolate. That's what Keith Chegwin is to me. He's the fun uncle.
But apparently he had just some deep feelings about some random looks and comments that he was making, and they came out because he was drunk. So, yep.
We'll move on from Kavanagh the bad drunk, and we'll go to our next eviction. Now, we're split into two parts this one. We're going to be talking about the first part, which is the nominations, which was Alicia, Katie Hopkins, Nadia, and Perez were all nominated for eviction. And as part of our new entrant twist, Katie Price was told that she had to say who she thought was the most entertaining housemate in the house. I love as well on the Channel 5 Eva how they just so blatant in how they phrase these things to deliberately try and get rid of the weak characters. So say most entertaining, vote out the most boring. So they even admit.
Yeah, there's no shield, there was no fake about it. They're just like, yeah, we just want you to vote out the boring ones.
They're so blatant about it, but Pricey, for her credit, she doesn't take the bait. Instead, she plays tactically, and she saves Katie Hopkins as per producer's wishes, and end up replacing her with Callum. And she even admits that she said, "I want to put Callum up because I know Callum won't go."
Did he go?
Although she was perfectly right, because of course a lot of tweens watched this show, and a lot of those tween fan base did support Callum simply because he looked like Callum best. But how hilarious would it have been if they've done this twist and Callum did go? What a great comedy moment that would have been.
Yeah, I kind of wish he had.
Because he wasn't a big character, that Callum, at all. And I mean, really, there was one big moment. He basically had a Frankie Kokoza moment and basically ended up becoming this big contender to win later on in the show. Pretty much by default.
Yeah, just because you hated everybody else.
Yeah. But yeah, Callum ends up joining the nomination lineup, so it's now Callum versus Alicia versus Nadia and Perez, and it's Alicia Duval who ends up going. Apparently, though, the vote was, through reports, very, very close between Perez and Alicia. So especially when we have the whole party line, when we look in retrospect, especially at that party line that Perez was this big, prominent character in the show, to think that he very nearly went against Alicia Duval says a lot about how the public's perception of him and the producer's perception of him was so different.
Well, I think it's also the fact of once you get down to two people, you can block vote the other person and get the one you hate out.
Which is why when production do these multi-person evictions, they're always very cynical in whether or not they do vote freezes or not. Very noticeably, they didn't use one in today's eviction because Perez would have gone. But the person who did go that week was Alicia Duval. Now, Alicia is someone who, I have to be honest, we haven't really mentioned her, which is a real shame, because I think if you look at this series in retrospect and you keep an eye on Alicia and her sort of mini story arc, I think she's a very likeable, very enjoyable girl.
Yeah, I think that, besides the whole stupid thing she's done to her face, but,
Someone made the comment she looked like Tiffany Wilson of White Chicks.
Oh.
That's harsh.
But no, when she was in there, she was just nice enough and didn't mind her own business, and then the girls started being bitches to her for no reason, and everything she did made her a hate figure for no reason, and they just bullied her, and I hate to use that word, but that's what they did, especially Camille Lee.
And it was a big deal as well that one of the big criticisms they made out about Alicia was the fact that she was stupid. Which
is coming from Camille Lee.
Exactly.
And Chloe of all people. Camille Lee especially, some of the comments she said about her were unacceptable, and I really feel like I really feel like Cammy Lee would have been a far better, heroine again if she had just not been on the Perez side. I think going down with the Perez route, I mean, you felt sorry for her, but at the same time, she was latching on to, and I don't blame her because it was the only person in the house that was giving her a time of day. But at the same time, you got to choose what hill to die on, and she chose the Perez hill.
But yeah, I liked Alicia, and I don't think she's going to be a character that people are going to remember in later years. She's certainly more than a big prominent character, but I think she's somebody who I really enjoyed when the series was on, and I think people would come to appreciate it if you ever did rewatch the series.
Yeah, I think that she was a likeable person who I got behind for how other people were being with her, and I was just like, wow, just chill the hell out.
And you made me think as well, in retrospect, that having a genuinely positive influence, considering how negative the show did get in the later weeks, it might maybe in retrospect should have been good to keep Alicia in there to be that positive energy. Now we come to another big controversy, and it also brings up a lot of issues concerning a lot of the pre-show manipulation, especially a lot of the incentives to try and get people onto the show, which again is this big ethical issue surrounding what Big Brother means in this day and age, which is that Perez had been threatening to quit for a long time prior to this. A lot of these times they were shown, and according to Perez, a lot of the moments as well didn't make the broadcast. But there was one big one where Perez was adamant, I am going to go, I want to go, let me leave now, I've had enough, I want to see my agent, etc. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, this secret bedsit task comes out for Perez.
We spoke about the moment that I turned off, and this was it. This was the thing that just made me go, you know what? There's better things I could be doing with my time than watching this garbage. I'm gonna people who gonna hate that comment. I'm sorry, but that's
no, it's okay. It's okay.
That's how I felt at the time because you try and justify watching it, and you know what, I enjoy it. I enjoy it for this reason. I enjoy this psychological experiment. I enjoy it for watching people. I just enjoy it because I enjoy it and all this stuff. And I wasn't enjoying it, and it was just so like crystal clear. It's like, how stupid do you think we are? Like, it was just like this guy is such a self-centered idiot, and it's obvious that the production loved him because of all the arguments he caused. And as soon as he actually was going to go, not only did they invent an entire task just to make him stay, they're like, oh, we invented this task to basically you saying you want to leave, so we're going to let you leave, but no, you're going to be in control. The show's going to be centered around you, which of course everything he loves, the world be centered around him, so they gave him exactly what he wanted. They changed the entire format of the show, the entire format of the week, just to placate this fucking twat. And as a result, it became the Perez Show. It had been the Perez Show, and they literally may as well rename the show the Perez Show.
And he even came up with his own theme tune. He started singing to himself. It was the Perez Show.
Yep, and that's exactly what they did by doing this task. And then, on top of all of that, it was another bedsit task, which at this point, every time any sort of mention of a secret room comes on, I want to take hot spikes and poke them into my eyes. I'm done with the bedsit, I was done with Perez, and I'm done with the production being... They don't even pretend anymore! They rewrote the entire show just to keep this guy. Done! Switched off, didn't watch again, and just recapped. And I apologise, I'll be reacting to results more than anything from this point forward, because I was done with the show. And probably will watch it again in summer, but until then, done.
That was a party political broadcast from the Dutton Party.
Ta-da!
Oh, well, for one thing, you probably said as much as what I was going to say. I had this whole list of notes of things I was going to bring up, but I'm not sure how much of it I can now. But one thing that really sort of surprised me was Perez basically admitted it after the show. He admitted the twist was created for him, and that producers were telling him how great, how popular the character he was. The thing that shocked me was there were people who were surprised by that. I mean, I could blatantly see why they did it.
I want to go. Oh, Perez, we've got this task where you can go and the whole show's about you. Oh, wait, I'll stay. Well, it was invented for him. I wonder how many brain cells some of these people who watch these shows have. Obviously none.
But they even done it before, though. That's the thing that surprised me as well, is that They've done it before. They did it with Spencer and Heidi. They basically created the task for them during their season.
Yep. It's just the blatant favoritism. I just like you. At least in the old days, you'd use subtle editing techniques. Now you just don't. You think we're so stupid that we won't notice, and in some cases we don't, or at least the majority of the audience don't, because the majority of the audience are that stupid apparently.
The thing is as well is that it's why they chose Perez. Look, I know Perez was causing controversy, but if you looked at the opinion polls as well and the people online, Perez was hated. In the television industry, we're always supposed to believe that we have to give the people what they want, and what the people wanted was Les Perez. It really, and it's stuff like that really frustrates me, especially on a show like Big Brother, which is so reliant on public involvement, that so many times production go out their way to do the opposite of what the production team want.
But at the same time, it's also, there's the other side of it where they get the public are stupid and get rid of good characters. So it's, sometimes you don't know. There's a fine line there between entertaining and actually entertaining of, I'm the guy who always makes the wrestling analogies. It's Xbox heat. It's the guy who you literally don't want to watch anymore. You hate because you do not want to watch him anymore. He's not being a good heel. You just don't want to watch him.
I'm just going to vision Perez as X-Pac now.
Well, he did start straddling the window.
One of the other things this brings up as well is the bending of the outside world rules in regards to certain characters being around the show. Obviously, we've touched on it with Perez. Well, we basically smothered it with Perez. But also, there were other issues, the things that came out after the show, where basically the rules of the show were bent over to add incentives to get big characters. So, of course, we had stories coming out that Katie Hopkins was allowed to write a Sun columns whilst in the house. Patsy Kensit had a hairdresser being brought in. Perez himself was allowed to record an episode of the radio show. And I just want to bring up the bending of the rules, because Big Brother has always been sold as a show being no contact with the outside world, isolation, etc., etc. Now, these rules have been bent in the past before. Has a line begun to be crossed?
I think the line was crossed the moment they went to Channel 5. I think the entire Channel 5 era is ripe with these. From, what was it, the Babe Watch woman whose name I can't think of right now.
Pamela Anderson.
Pamela Anderson, there we go. Why can't I think of that name? Yeah, when she was in a secret room and then she walked in there and you could see the umbrella from the photograph thing that was obviously a production room. And it was like, what? Again, how stupid do you think we are? Rylan being let out to do his auditions and things, and it's not like they say, oh, there's a big placard that shows him doing it, and have Marcus Bentley going, Perez is leaving because he has to do this, blah blah blah. Like they don't even show it on the show. They try and cover it up and lie to us and say that they're not having contact with the outside world, when in fact they are, because they don't care. They don't care about the rules. They only care about making sure they can get these people, and the price of getting these people is placating to them. So. The show is a joke. The show is a shell of its former self. It is a joke, and yeah.
Do you think if they were more honest to the audience would maybe tolerate it a lot more?
Yep. If they didn't try and cover it up, if they were just like, yes, they're breaking their rules, but if they at least were honest about it, rather than trying to cover it up, trying to pretend that they still follow the rules, that's worse by far.
Do you think, to defend the production team as well, to an extent, the show is reliant on big star power to try and get those casual viewers watching. I can imagine there being a lot of people who heard the likes of Katie Hopkins, Patsy Kensit, etc. were going to be on the show and maybe a bit more interested. Do you think in regards for star power and selling the show, it's maybe a sacrifice worth taking, rather than sticking to the rules and ending up with a house full of caverners?
Maybe. But just be honest about it.
Yes.
Like, I don't care that she gets to write her column. It's not like she's on, instant messenger chatting with her friends, like, oh, am I coming across? So long as you show us her doing it and say there is stringent rules where she's only allowed to send this message through Big Brother and she's not allowed on the internet in any other way, and you tell us this is the parameters of how she's doing it, and you show us that, then I'd be like, okay, fair enough. But it's because you cover it up, I'm wondering what else you're covering up, and I'm wondering how much access the rest of them have, because you lied about that, so why can't you just lie about everything?
It creates more cynicism surrounding the show.
Yup, it makes me think that the entire thing is fake, and the entire thing is a lie.
Now, one of the things that was touched on with in regards to Perez controlling the other housemates, Hopkins, Nadia, and Patsy were nominated for that week. And there was a tie between Camille Lee and Kavanagh, which Perez was allowed to break up. So Camille Lee ended up joining up that foursome. And then we come to that eviction, and it's a close vote between Cammy and Patsy, and it's Patsy who ends up being evicted.
What a surprise. Haven't mentioned her so far, so yep.
Not really, no. But I quite liked Patsy. I'd always been a fan of Patsy Kensit prior to the show, because I think she is a quite pleasant person off screen. What I loved about her, though, and we should have touched this earlier on, but again, it was more of a subtle story. Patsy just practically went insane while she was in the house. Yeah,
she was entertaining in terms of the, go away, I'm meditating, as I'm walking around the garden trying to calm myself down, but I'm meditating, go away. That was all fun, and kind of her breakdown was fun to watch, but it just got to the point, it was like, oh, if you want to go, just go.
Yeah. But I really did like the girl, and again, it's another positive presence, especially over someone like Camille Lee, because I think Camille Lee is a character which has a very short shelf life in terms of how much of that sort of brash personality you can take. And we'd ran out by that point. Her storyline was done. Things weren't happening between her and Callum Best. For the sake of the show, I think it would have been best if she had gone that week instead of Patsy, and just kept on that sort of Patsy mini arc in the background.
I suppose, but I reckon she would have walked eventually if she'd stayed too long.
Whilst Patsy ended up being evicted, it made the way for Perez's triumphant, in inverted commas, return to the house. Now, there was a funny moment where we did see Katie Hopkins' face, and that was quite comedic. I found that quite fun. Whether or not she, in her head, was probably pleasantly surprised about it because it gave her back her target. But the big controversy about it was the online vote concerning Perez, which was that Perez was either going to be eternally nominated, i.e. he was going to face eviction every week until the end, or he was going to get the dreaded pass to the final.
Yeah, it was production, just being production, manipulating the show, and at least they put the out in there of, well, if you really don't like him, have him nominated every week. Look, we're not being favourites. Look, we're not playing favourites.
But I think personally they wanted Perez in the final.
Well, yeah, but...
But I think as well, regardless of who this person was, this person could have been Gandhi for all I care. And in my opinion, they still would have voted eternal nominations, simply because Pass to the Final has so many negative connotations because of what happened with Helen in the summer series. I mean, there were a lot of people who just hate that idea of someone getting something which they are not seen to deserve.
Yeah, I think if production thought otherwise, they're as dumb as they think we are.
Of course, these nominations weren't given to us because of probably about 80-20 towards eternal nominations. One of the worries I had, though, when he mentioned Perez will be eternally nominated, I just had this awful vision of the next 5 or 10 years of Big Brother with every season having Perez Hilton in it. And just the idea of eternal nominations just every year. Here's Perez again!
Oh, God. Oh, God. If you never want me to watch the show again, sure.
Well, yeah, we'll move on. And Perez was eternally nominated, thankfully. Now, there was a big controversy, though, upon Perez's return to the house, which was him licking Katie Hopkins, and Perez getting a formal warning for it.
Oh, dear. Just seeing how far he can push it. Huh?
Definitely, and there was a lot of that from Perez during this week. Of course, there were comments to Callum, which basically ended up being the big boost that Callum did. There was a sort of gay slur against Callum where he said, "I think you're saying," and I think Perez said something like, "Are you saying I'm a dick? I'll be the dick. I'll shove my dick up your rear end." And there again, that was a big controversial thing, and I think Callum basically ended up getting the big boost solely on the back of that, because Callum ended up opposing that, ended up really speaking out against Perez, and there was this furore of people coming out the woodwork and saying, "Oh, I love Callum, he took on Perez, and I'm going to vote for him to win," despite the fact he did absolutely nothing before then.
Well, this show's full of those.
But again, I used the Frankie Kokoza reference because Frankie essentially did the same thing to the twins after Pantsgate, and ended up finishing runners up to Denise, largely on the back of that.
Yeah, and the Sam ended up winning with it. So.
Yeah, exactly, because he opposed Dexter during his season.
Mm-hmm.
But we come to week 4. Perez, of course, is eternally nominated. We're going a bit quicker now, I feel, because again, as you said, week 4 and week 5, they were very. It was just Hopkins versus Perez. That was the only storyline that the show had, and it did get very tiresome. It sort of perked up a bit for the final week, which of course we'll come to later on.
Why was this extended? Is it just because they knew they got high ratings?
I think it was demand. I think because they were on such a high following 13 and 14 with Jim Davidson and Gary Busey series. I think they thought we can afford to squeeze this out for a few more days to try and get more.
But it's oversaturating the market because you've already got 2 of these every year, plus you've got the regular show. You know, it's just too much. You're just going to kill it.
I've got the feeling this will be the only time to do it. I think this is an experiment which went wrong because it got very, very tiresome. I mean, if they cut the series down by a week, I think the show would have been far better for it. But it did get very, very hard to watch. Well, of course, I'm the only person who could say that because, of course, you went off outside into the real world to escape it all.
I just found better things to watch that are actually entertaining television.
Yeah. Whilst you were doing that, I was watching an eviction between Katie Hopkins, Keith Chegwin, Nadia Sawala, and Perez Hilton. And it came as no surprise it ended up being Nadia who was out that week. Now, we haven't mentioned Nadia, and I feel that's doing her a bit of injustice in my opinion, because I think that Nadia was a very big character in the show. Essentially, she was the only person I felt who really stayed on that Perez bus all the way to the end.
Yeah, I think that was a downfall though.
It was.
And I would have liked her, and she was a likable personality. I just think she stuck with Perez out because of her opposition to Kay Hopkins and what everything Kay Hopkins stood for, and that was a mistake.
Nadia, for me, in the way that she dealt with Perez, she always reminded me of the mother of a bad child at a school meeting. I can just imagine the teachers saying to her, Perez, he's causing all these problems, he's threatening this, that, and the other. And Nadia being that sort of mother who says, oh no, you just need to embrace him a lot more, you need to encourage him and support him.
He needs to be put into a vat of water with eels and let him fry.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I think she felt like she had to defend him because he was being alienated, but yeah.
But the main purpose of why she defended him was because Perez was anti-Hopkins and she was anti-Hopkins by association.
Yeah.
One thing I do give Nadia a lot of credit for, and was because she was very pro-Perez, she had opportunities to flip. She had opportunities to ditch Perez, say stuff that I'm not associating with him. And to her credit, she stuck by him. And I think regardless of who that person is, I think he does deserve a lot of praise for that, because she got a lot of criticism from people on internet forums, the fans outside, simply for associating herself with Perez. And she stuck to her guns about it, which I do think she does deserve some credit for. Because I do think Nadia is a nice woman, and she is a massive Big Brother fan. And I do support people who are very open about admitting to watching the show, I have to be honest, because there's not a lot of us out there anymore.
And to be honest, I'm starting to turn on it, so yeah, I'm joining the other side.
I'll pull you back, don't worry, Carl.
Just go and go post on all the producers and take over. That's probably the only way, I think.
I would do the same thing if we get Bam Margera in with it.
But we've got to do an episode where we talk about our dream celebrity casting.
Yeah, but he just ended up throwing himself off the roof.
Fuck this shit!
And of course, as well, Nadia also keeps up the continuation of having a loose woman on the show, and having a loose woman that ends up being a big prominent character. Have we ever had a dud loose woman yet?
Oh no, because they're outspoken.
Yeah. So I enjoyed Nadia. We haven't talked about her that much, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who are going to come to her aid and defend her. Now, week 5, we get the Freak Show task. Again, it's basically a selection of mini tasks, a lot of them designed to, again, wind up people. The big standout for me in the Freak Show task, though, was Kavanagh. I'm trying to think.
Tweets about him, aye.
Yeah, he had to sing tweets which were said about him. And all these tweets are just basically saying, you're absolutely terrible housemate, no one cares about you, why don't you go away, stuff like that.
Hashtag twat.
And I did feel a little bit sorry for Canada, but that was one of those bitterly ironic, funny moments for me. I thought it was a very fun task, and everybody contributed. One of the very few light moments from that sort of negative end of the season. And it sort of brings us on to one of the reasons for the negativity, which is that general house split. Not so much Perez versus the rest of the house, but by this point as well, Keith Chegwin and Katie Price also ended up being ostracised somewhat for being out of the loop. As Keith especially ended up getting a lot of grief for being neutral on a lot of opinions. People started calling him Switzerland as a nickname. I just wanted your opinion of that, especially from the concept of Keith and Katie Price, less so Perez.
Well, both of them don't have a career to begin. Both of them don't have a career between them, so, you know, there's that.
What multi-millionaire businesswoman glamour girl Katie Price doesn't have a career?
Ah, good point, well made.
Yeah. But yeah, because I really love the friendship between Keith and Katie Price as well, because that's such an unlikely combination of people who just said we need to stick to each other through basically self-preservation. And I really enjoyed the friendship between the two, and also it gave us one of the best nicknames for a team ever on Big Brother history, because of course it was Pricey and Cheggers, and of course people on the forums started calling them Preggers.
That's good.
Which is one of my favourite nicknames for a group ever. Everyone just saying I'm Team Preggers.
Okay, I could see why maybe she again started being likable towards the end, and I could definitely see when I was watching it that she was coming across as likable, but I just wondered how much of that was just, I don't know, not so much an act as just her toning herself down and not speaking about things that would get her disliked.
Well, the only things that Katie Price really spoke about up until that point was her boyfriend's sex acts.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that, and yeah, dear God.
You can really get it all in there. Stuff like that. It's like, hang on a minute, I'm watching this show with my parents. And we're having Katie Price talking about what she can shove up her boyfriend's bum.
And the stuff where he like dresses up as a woman, and you're like, oh my God.
Yeah, you basically...
No, that was Alex Reid.
That was Alex Reid.
Yeah.
You can basically see Karl's parents in the background, looking, having mouths wider than that Patrick meme. Gordon Bennett. Hey, Mum, hey, Dad, how are you liking the show?
What the hell?
Karl! The hell!
You should have seen him after the whole George Galloway cat incident. But yeah, we'll move on away from what my parents watch on television, and instead we'll go to our next eviction. Now for Channel 5, this was something that we need to make a big song and dance about. We had a unique eviction format, which was... I say unique, it was unique by Big Brother standards. It was basically completely ripped off from the X Factor, but never mind.
Okay.
Which was a flash vote. It was a unique eviction where basically it was a 2-hour format where we basically had the first hour of the show showing the highlights, and then the nominee lines were open. So it was basically almost 15 to 20 minutes of just a flash vote, and then you get rid of someone, with a very unique concept for Big Brother standards. Did you like the concept of a flash vote? Did you think it worked?
An interesting sort of concept with a flash vote, because again, you're separating out the content in a way, stretching the show a lot longer, which to be honest is sort of on par with Seth MacFarlane padding some of his shows. But yeah, it can be. It sounded interesting, so no.
It was something different, but again, though, Channel 5 made the mistake of trying to hype it up as a noms bombshell. But honestly, one of my least favourite words with the Channel 5 view of the show is bombshell.
Or noms. Or any sort of cliched hashtag, whatever.
Rock the house. That's another one which they always use. But the problem was it was never going to rock the house when we saw who the nominations were. It was Pricey versus Keith versus Perez versus Cammy Lee. One of those things is not like the other one.
None of these things just doesn't belong! Sorry.
And of course that person in question was Cammy Lee. Of course Cammy Lee didn't have the fan days, didn't have any major prominence compared to the other two or any sort of star power. it was a given she was going to go that week. But of course, the show decided to rip off the Lee Ryan eviction from last year's series, and Cammy Lee was removed by the magic mirror on the side of the house. Now, we talk about here's our chance to talk about Cammy Lee as housemate. Now, I've always got the impression, and I don't know why, this sounds strange, I've always got the impression for me, Cammy Lee thought she was a bigger character on the show than what she was. I always felt the way that she talked about herself, a lot of the comments she made, she always tried to go for that sort of phrasing, to try and basically, in Cammy Lee's head, these were things which people were going to say in the offices. They would say how great Cammy Lee was. I really get the feeling she thought she was bigger than what she really was on the show. Because what she was on the show was essentially this irritating chola girl, which people got tired of very, very quickly.
She was, the mean girl. She was the, in every way, the kind of Geordie Shore type, and there's a reason I don't watch that show.
Basically shotgun fodder.
It's almost for me. It's almost as if Cammy Lee had watched a couple of episodes of Bad Girls Club and thought, I can do that. And by the way, watch Bad Girls Club, because if you love that sort of like MTV television, it's amazing. So I'm just putting that out there for people. But she was also very vulgar in her eviction interview. She got a lot of comments for a lot of the things she said, especially about Alicia. Now we're going to move on as well, and we're going to be talking about something which we haven't really touched on, because we mentioned Michelle prior to the show, and there was also a big issue about Michelle's party line about the gay community. This was a big part of Michelle's storyline, how she was doing it for the gays, how she was one of them, and she was representing them. And I just want to talk about the whole party line, because Perez, in one of the very few Perez moments I actually agree with him with, basically called out Michelle for that and said, hang on a minute, you say you're doing it for the gays. You're not even gay. I'm a gay person. You don't represent us. Yeah. And for Perez's credit, I do agree with that, because I think maybe because Michelle's from America and has a very different attitude towards the gay community over there.
It's like if Patrick Stewart was saying he's a feminist.
I just felt it was very, very patronising. And I know a lot of gay friends that felt the same way, that you had Michelle basically making out that the gay community couldn't speak for themselves.
Yeah, I get what I think I liked that she said, I hate that Perez is the representation of that, yes. which is definitely good, because I also agree with that. I think being gay means you don't have to be this over-the-top, drama queen, for lack of a better word. But I think that, there was just she was closely on board with Katie Hopkins, which was her downfall, and then on top of that, those comments riled people. I could see why people turned on her for that.
Yeah, because it became Michelle's only real storyline in the show. That was the only thing she seemed to be living off during her time in there. It got very, very tiresome quite quickly, in my opinion. But also as well, the issue was on a show like Big Brother, we've seen people like Christopher, for example, from Big Brother 15, who was such a progressive gay character, that Michelle basically preaching this whole party line was null and void. But that's just me, though, and we're coming to we're into the final few days, lads. You can it'll nearly be over, don't worry. And we're going to our midweek eviction. Of course, as they usually do on these series, if you have 7 people in the house, you need to get rid of 2 of them before the finale night. So it's a double midweeker, and it's no surprise Kavanagh is the first one to go.
Nah.
Nah, that's the only thing you can really say about Kavanagh.
He was a nice enough guy, but his most entertaining moment was that thing where he went nuts on Keith. That was all he ever did, really.
But especially compared to the star power, the rest of those which are there, star power, prominence, entertainment, etc. Kavanagh was the fish out of water. I mean, there were a lot of people on the forums who were basically saying, is Kavanagh going to beat Jenny's record for the lowest vote to win percentage ever? Because I mean, on Facebook, you always do these vote to win percentages. You have to like and retweet for whoever you want to win. And you had people like Katie Price and Katie Hopkins, etc., getting something like 700 likes, etc. And Kavanagh only had about 20. I mean, he was just so out of place on the finale, and there were a lot of people who were relieved to see him go, just simply because he hadn't had the chance to since. And he was just like, we do not want him anywhere near our finale because he just hasn't deserved it. A lot of people frustrated they never had a chance to get rid of him. But yeah, he was a decent enough person. There was a snidey comments towards Keith, etc., and the way he handled his drink, but I was never offended by him.
No, he was a nice enough guy, yeah.
I never had any sort of emotion to him, that's the problem. Although for our next person, there's somebody who we have no problem trying to have an opinion about. It's a certain Mr. Hilton.
Ah.
Oh, yeah. I think I've vented my vile against this person enough. I think, yup, it dragged on too long. It was like a long, agonising death, whereas I wish it was just a quick hang.
Because honestly, in my opinion, I actually think that if Perez had been in there for, let's say, the first 2 evictions, let's say he'd been that sort of Frenchie-esque, early season, controversy magnet, and get rid of him in the second week and allow other stories to develop, I would have tolerated him a lot more. Keeping him around and keeping the Katie Hopkins storyline going, which just got incredibly stale, incredibly tiresome, and had 2 unlikable characters basically camera hogging between each other for airtime, ended up destroying the show. It ended up ruining any sort of dynamics that came from the show. If he'd just been in there for 2 weeks, it would have been fine. Could you imagine, for example, the one I like to use it with Perez is, imagine Big Brother 14 if you'd had Sally Axel and Wolfie artificially kept in right until the end of the season.
Well, I kind of enjoyed them more. I don't know. There's something about, and I mean, I think this comes back to kind of my irritation with the Marco-esque characters. There's something about those kind of characters that annoy me inherently, just because I think it's a bad representation of that community. I think it's a certain side of the community that I think that straight people think that's what gay people are, and it annoys me that when they're poster child to live up to the stereotype, and not only live up to the stereotype, but then enforce the stereotype and play up to it and ramp up their personality to where there is nothing about them that is real. Everything is artificial, everything is over exaggerated. I just want them to calm down and just be real people and not be caricatures and cartoons.
Because that's what Perez was, because Perez is essentially a troll for a living. So he's obviously going to wind people up. We're never going to see proper Perez Hilton on a show like this because he's just always going to play up to the cameras.
Yeah.
Were you surprised though that he ended up going before the finale, considering the amount of airtime?
I think people had enough. I think people finally was just like, oh, just please, end it. Let's get him out of there before some stupid block of fandom votes for him and he wins.
And honestly as well, the show needed it. It needed a break from Perez. Even if it was just 2 days, which it was, it needed that break just to see what it would have been like without him. Yep. Because I think even in those 2 days, which we're just coming to here, even in those 2 days, I think a lot of eyes were opened in regards to the rest of the housemates, especially with Katie Hopkins, because I think that once Perez left and Katie Hopkins found her next target, which ended up being Keith and Katie Price, a lot of those people which were taken in by Hopkins solely because she disliked Perez realised, hang on a minute, we need to question this a bit more.
Absolutely.
Have we made the right decision backing this person?
Good. At least people, it took long enough, but at least this wasn't another Helen situation where, somebody, just because they caused controversy means they should win.
Yes. And honestly, I'll come to that when we discuss the final result, but I was so relieved that wasn't the case. One of the things that I want to talk about is Hopkins turning on Katie Price, and ask that question: did this more than anything end up costing Hopkins the win? Because I think
very likely, yes. This probably meant that's how Katie won, because at the end of the day, having one of the villains against you, having both of the villains against you, well, you're going to come out smelling like roses, aren't you, really?
There was a lot of speculation, though, that a lot of people felt that showcasing this so much, especially on a finale night, was an indication that production were looking for Pricey to win.
Maybe. They're like, we paid her enough, may as well at least call it a winner's fund.
Yeah. So we come to finale night, and for all some of the criticisms that people have about this series, which I think we basically covered this show with, One of the things I did like about finale night was the unpredictability. I think a lot of people can say they honestly didn't know who was going to win. I mean, you could have easily made a case for all 5 being the victor. Yeah.
It could be interesting to see a 5-way tie.
It's annoying that it ended up being the most predictable, but yes.
I would actually love to see how they would actually handle a tie situation, because I remember there was that vote between Hazel and Wolfie in Big Brother 14, and they said it's the closest eviction percentage ever. And I would just love to see how they would handle a tie vote.
Fight to the death, mostly.
Which involving Big Brother housemates would probably be more of a pleasant thing, to be honest. Yeah. The person who ends up going first, though, is Michelle Visage. And as we sort of touched on before, Michelle, in my opinion, was a real disappointment on the show, because thanks to Joe, I have to admit, Joe really did jump on the Michelle bandwagon and tell me how amazing she was on RuPaul's Drag Race. I had this real expectation she was going to be this snarky, sarcastic, really hilarious queen figure. And what we just said essentially got was a beta bitch lackey to Katie Hopkins.
Yeah.
Oh God, too.
I liked her enough in the early days, but then it just became, well, she's just her sidekick then now.
She didn't develop. She didn't grow as a character. The early season Michelle, I have to admit, was one of my favourite characters, but she didn't do anything. She didn't really showcase herself as an individual, rather than just being. And again, it goes to the whole situation where we talked about with Nadia. Was Michelle associating herself with Hopkins more down to the fact that Hopkins was against Perez?
Yeah, definitely.
I can really see how sort of enthusiasm for this series is really running low, which I think is quite symbolic of how a lot of people were feeling.
I just think again, a combination of I didn't watch this when it was on because I'd kind of given up at this point, and that's just kind of. But it's also the case of as soon as I saw what not only the stuff that happened, but also the result, it was just kind of like, well, yeah, I definitely could have not watched and predicted that, and that's exactly what happened. It was just kind of reaffirmed that that's just she's the most famous, so she wins, of course.
Well, we'll get to Katie Price once we get to it, and because we are going to be talking about Keith Chegwin, who finishes in 4th place. I have to be honest, if I was voting for the show purely based on likability throughout the season, Keith wins for me. Because Keith was genuinely a lovely, lovely bloke.
He was. If it was down to who's the nicest, he would have won in terms of keeping his character, keeping his head high. He was in there with a lot of people who would have made me go off and made me lose face and lower myself to their level, especially with the whole Kavanagh thing. He could have bit back at him and could have held it against him, but he didn't. And, you have to respect him for that. He kept his cool and he managed to keep safe face.
Were there any great Keith moments that come to mind for anyone? The one that mainly comes to mind for me is is Keith's really bad jokes.
Well, nobody was allowed to laugh in yet another repeated task because it was.
Don't get me wrong, repeated task, but I do love the fact that the production team used the Adagio for strings in the background for trying to really hype up just how tragic Keith's comedy was.
Well, yeah.
To be honest, when he was being the host to the freak show sort of thing, it just showed a little bit of the childhood sort of thing that I knew Chief Chegwin was when he was on Into Knockout. So,
are we still allowed to talk about Into Knockout in this sort of?
Why aren't we allowed to speak about it?
There was some controversy with one of the hosts.
Yes, Stuart Hall was one of the first people found by Operation U-Tree, so you sort of mentioned it to Knockout. Most people go to that version.
But Channel 5 actually brought back the show, and to be honest, that one was the more better than the other one.
Yeah, I think maybe it's a lot of childhood nostalgia on my part, but I did love Keith Chegwin, and Keith didn't disappoint me. Usually when you get a lot of big names, for Big Brother terms, star power signing, they usually end up disappointing. I think a lot of people can point to Vinnie Jones and the way that he came across on his series, ruined a lot of people's preconceptions of him. But I think Keith played up to his. I think he was a really enjoyable bloke, really likeable. And again, if people had voted based on that alone, he wins the show, in my opinion.
Aye.
But he's out in 4th place, so we get to our final 3. and it's Callum Best who ends up finishing third. And to be honest, the only really things that you can really think of when it comes to Callum Best is he's George Best's son, he's attractive, he argued Perez, and that was it.
He's basically the bloke. He's basically the bloke that they basically looked in the Yellow Pages, threw a dart, and then picked his name, and there we go.
Well, he's not Bobby Sable.
Yeah. At least he had some sort of notoriety. You know, he was fine. He was not using this word in the sense of in sort of the sexual sense, but I mean it in sort of he was the straight guy. He was the normal everyday guy that's in there, that's kind of the normal one looking at all this craziness and just being baffled by it as everybody else.
Although he did have that really bizarre Irish American accent, which always seemed to...
Yeah, it was like half Liverpool, half American. Okay. But
we come to our final two. Now, this is where I think me and Carl are really going to end up disagreeing on this one, because it came down to the two Katies. Am I the only one who would have loved Emma to really ham up the fact that they had two Katies in the final and just basically be like...
And the winner is Katie? Yeah.
Big 20-second long wait. Now, I do think we're going to end up crashing on this one, because I get the impression you weren't a fan of Katie Price as a winner.
I'm not a fan of Katie Price, and I will not make an apology for bringing that bias into it. I just don't like the woman, never have. Don't give a damn about her. I think she's a vile person who has made a career out of nothing. I think that she was goaded onto the show just because of her notoriety from other reality shows, and I think that by putting her in there, she's automatically a favourite, and I think that she pretended to be a nice, normal person in this show just to win and to get herself back in the public eye, which she did, and then as soon as she came out, turns out she's not that person.
I could very easily apply the same thing to Katie Hopkins, though.
Yeah, absolutely, but I don't like Katie Hopkins either.
No.
I'm saying that at least she would have won on the merits of stuff she'd done in the show, rather than the merits of stuff she'd done in other shows.
I personally disagree, and I think I'm very happy that Katie Price won this season, and I'll tell you why. Because I'd argue probably since after Sam won in Big Brother 14, and there was this big backlash against him for winning on the back of doing nothing. I think production have really gone out their way to try and make sure that the biggest characters win, regardless of how likeable or unlikable they are. So we've had this wave of these really divisive, unlikable winners which have come. So we've had Charlotte win, we've had Jim win, we've had Helen win. Even Gary had a couple of negative qualities to him, I'm afraid to say. And I think if Katie Hopkins had won and kept that continuation going, I wouldn't have felt comfortable with Big Brother being a show where being a bad person was seen as being an advantage. So for Katie Price to win, and to win largely on the back of not being Katie Hopkins, was something the show needed. It's not me defending people who don't do anything winning, but it's me also defending the fact that bad people shouldn't be rewarded.
Good point. Fair enough.
Just talking about Katie Hopkins though as well, because I think that Katie wanted to win. I think that Katie really did come across that idea, because you have to remember Katie is very competitive. She does have a big ego, and I think she really did want to win this show. And I think that once she failed to win, she came across very, very bitter. And I especially remember that interview with Emma, and I do at times criticise Emma because I think Emma let her own biases show during that exit interview. But personally, that's just my opinion, because I think Emma is a genuine fan of the show, and I think she didn't like Katie Hopkins, and I think that she let that show during her interview. And Katie, after basically spending the last month or so trying to convince us that she wasn't as bad a person as we all thought, almost immediately reverted to that tabloid, this morning type controversy chaser.
So basically a bitch then.
Yeah, she was. She was a bitch. She was a bitch in an interview. She was a bitch doing a bit on the side. Not a very pleasant person. And it, in my opinion, vindicated the right decision being made of her not winning.
She's a bitch, and we wish she went away.
And this, of course, brings us on to our winner, which is Katie Price. And again, a lot of the controversy may stand. Did she win because of her star power? Did she win because she was likeable? Did she win because she was the biggest name and people voted for her by default? A lot of these arguments go across. I think it was a combination of both. I do defend her as a winner, and I've mentioned why, but we'll open it up to the phone.
I've said my piece, and yep. I think that not watching the last couple... I think if I'd watched the last couple of weeks, I would understand it. But just looking at the result, my own bias came into it.
I'm just going to say tits.
Well, they're gone now. She's back to naturals.
Oh.
It was pretty much the only reason to like Katie Price for a long while. But yeah, so that brings us on to the end of Celebrity 15. Our assessments of it as a series, because it was essentially a tale of two halves. I think if you went to those first 10 episodes, I should say, it's up there as being one of the best ever.
Yeah, the first 2 weeks were so crazy and so eventful. It was fun wackiness. It was like, oh my god, I can't believe, you were seeing the just how could it get any more crazy? Then it just kept getting more crazy. It's like, what is going on? And then it just became very sort of the argument. It got to the point of the same as the summer series last year. It was like, oh god, those two argued again.
Right.
And then by the end of it, it was just like, oh boy, that was a long series.
This series for me symbolises both the good and the bad of the Channel 5 era of the show.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
So yeah, that's all that we've got to say about Celebrity Big Brother 15. It's a series which, as I mentioned before at the start of the show, it's not one that we essentially like, but it's one we are very happy to talk about and really get into a lot of discussions about it. So
I'm sorry, people, that every time I come on a Channel 5 show, I just end up venting on production. But it's just so clear and obvious. I'm sorry.
Hey, it's okay. It's okay. I think a lot of people agree with you. We're very cynical about the series. We're basically wrestling fans.
Yeah. It's another thing that I was really good once upon a time, and I tuned in hoping it could be that again.
Yes, I think you've said it absolutely perfectly there. But that was Celebrity 15. It's a series which we've had a lot of fun talking about, but that is the end of the show. Again, it'll probably take us another 6 months or something to get to our next episode, but yeah, once we do, we're going to be talking about Big Brother 4, which is going to be a completely different challenge altogether.
Oh god, it's going to be 10 minutes long.
So, Big Brother 4, and there you go.
Yeah. Until next time, I've really enjoyed talking about this show. I hope you've enjoyed listening to it. My name's been Carl Burmage. That's been Carl Dutton.
Thank you for listening.
That's been Paul Barron.
Yay, Shaggers!
And we'll see you again in the future. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.